What is good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another SK Wealth Academy podcast, and let's get started. So before I get started, I want to let you know there's been some demand for me to make my ebook, The Golden Gift, in which I speak about the concept to sound money in a parable that's very easy for people to understand. What is exactly wrong with our current fiat currency system? And because a lot of times when that concept is explained in very dry academic terms, people still don't get it. So I told that story in a parable, and I made that available only to my newsletter subscribers. My newsletter is totally free, so you can sign up by just going to the podcast show notes below and just look at the link to my news site where you can sign up for free for my newsletter. And then I'll probably wait a couple more days after this particular podcast goes up to give people a chance to subscribe, and I'll put a direct link to my ebook, my free ebook, The Golden Gift, because I first gave out 300 copies for free, and then I said it's going to be limited time, and then some people say, hey, I missed it, could you please put that up for maybe a couple hundred more free downloads? So I'll do that. I'm going to give the people what they want. I'm going to put it up online again. So just make sure you subscribe to my free newsletter. If you're already subscribed, you don't have to unsubscribe and subscribe, because what will happen is you will receive a newsletter with that direct download link in the newsletter. So don't worry about having to subscribe again if you're already subscribed and missed the first time I gave away my ebook for free, because I'm going to go ahead and do it again. So let's get started. So today's podcast, I am going to talk about why Bill Gates is the new John Pierpont Morgan and David Rockefeller. And a lot of times, this particular podcast, I wasn't even planning to speak about this subject at all. But within the past couple of years, I've had at least half a dozen conversations with strangers that think Bill Gates is a great man, a great philanthropist, because they always say to me, look at all the great work he's done with trying to vaccinate children all over the world, and they don't understand he has a dark ulterior motive, which I can understand. So that's why I'm going to do that by explaining how he relates to two other great, in air quote, philanthropists like David Rockefeller and John Pierpont Morgan. I'm also going to talk about other great philanthropists, because the kind of philanthropist Bill Gates is very comparable to the philanthropists like Raymond Sackler. If you don't know who he is, stay tuned. I'm assure you, if you're American, you know who he is. You just don't know what he was involved in, right? What he used this philanthropy to hide his involvement. But surely you do know about the great destruction he caused in America when I go into that. And of course, the big drug lord, Pablo Escobar, who had who was viewed very, very differently within Colombia by many of the poor. He was even actually called Santo Pablo, Saint Pablo, because he was, for his philanthropy, his great philanthropy. And I'll tell you, that's the kind of philanthropy Bill Gates is involved in. So it's very interesting, because there is a great need of people like Bill Gates, other oligarchs, to control perception. They don't even really care what reality is, because as long as they can control perception, that is what's important to them. So as long as they can be perceived as a philanthropist, then they don't really care, because they know by controlling perception, people will never understand the reality of who they really are. So just like in China, right? In China, the state enforces everything. So, the Chinese state is seen as a big bad wolf, whereas in the US or the UK, Australia, they use much more devious strategies in which they direct their own citizens to police and spy on other citizens and to snitch on them, and become kind of like they have their own network built within their citizenry to spy on, snitch on other citizens, or they form these alliances with big tech to spy on their own citizens. And so that is why, like I often say, if Malcolm X were alive today, I'm sure he would actually have a lot more respect for the state tactics deployed by the Chinese government than the Australian government, the Canadian government, the US government, the UK government. Because in China, it's all overt and out in the open. Whereas in those other nations I just named, it's much more subliminally deployed by the strategy of divide and conquer, turn one neighbor against the other. Oh my God, you're not wearing a mask, or you have more than 10 people in your home, I'm going to report you so you can get a 10,000 pound fine by the government. And so they turn worker against coworker, neighbor against neighbor, pedestrian against pedestrian. And why do I say Malcolm would have more respect for the state of China than any of these other nations? Because he, quote unquote, stated, I have more respect for a man who lets me know where he stands, even if he's wrong, than the one who comes up like an angel and is nothing but a devil, end quote. So of course, that would not to say that Malcolm actually would respect the totalitarian tactics taken by China, but it's all out in the open. They let you know exactly where you stand. Where in these other countries, they try to be a lot more devilish about their tactics. So, and also, just thinking of even my martial arts training, I learned a lot from the tactics deployed by oligarchs, because, and I'll probably post this to my Instagram, because like I said, people don't really need to follow me on Instagram if they're a Patreon of mine already, because I'm giving you 1,000 times more valuable information on Patreon, and you will see that in a couple of weeks. If you're not subscribed to my YouTube channel, go subscribe to it, because I'm going to tell you, when everyone was saying, when all the Redditors on Wall Street Bets, these threads were saying they're going to squeeze silver to the moon in February and March, I'm going to tell you exactly what I told my Patreons. So you're going to be able to see the massive value of my Patreon membership. And I was going to say that I learned how effective in martial arts when feigning a strike is, right? You could kind of dip, and then people will cover up their body, and then you left hook to their head, or you could even feint with one hand going to the head, and they're going to cover up their head, and then you do a massive strike. You do a low leg kick to the calf. So misdirection happens all the time with the oligarchs. Just like I think that's actually one of the most underutilized skills in MMA today. Still, the feigning a punch or kick to deliver, a real strike, or feigning to deliver a counter strike. So again, where was I going with this? Well, it's just I know Bill Gates, his whole guise of philanthropy is just feigning. He's feigning, and he's misleading people about who he truly is, what his true character is. And now I'm going to explain why I compared him to the John Pierpont Morgans and David Rockefellers of the world that are no longer with us, but their families still are, their family members and their clans still are with us. So last August of 2020, Bill Gates said, quote, normalcy only returns when we largely vaccinate the entire population, end quote. And not only did he say that, he said, quote, multiple doses may be necessary, end quote. So why would he want people to receive multiple doses when their survival rate for under 19 is 99.98%, and for under 50 it's like 99.7%, okay? And it's still very high for even under 70. The mortality rates only start increasing and becoming dangerous at the over 70-year-old age demographic. And who made him the health czar of the entire world when he has no background in health sciences? Now, why I said he's very similar to John Pierpont Morgan and David Rockefeller is because people have studied who are the Gates Foundation contributing in their philanthropic work towards. They gave over $250 million to media distribution outlets, and all across the world, not just Western outlets. They contributed to UK outlets like the BBC, American outlets like NBC, Middle Eastern outlets like even Al Jazeera, and then more UK outlets like The Guardian, Spanish outlets like Univision. They're even contributing to Univision. And so they're trying to affect what the Latino population thinks of this whole lockdown and everything. They're contributing to other interests like, man, it goes on and on. ProPublica, National Journal, Medium, Financial Times, which is UK, The Atlantic, which is US, Texas Tribune, which is definitely US, Gannett, I believe, is US, Washington Monthly, Le Monde, France, the Center for Investigative Reporting, what else? BBC Media Action, New York Times. So it's crazy. It's crazy. And even some of the media companies that the Gates Foundation is contributing to, they're linked to other big influencers as far as what people believe about certain narratives going on. So they contributed to other media companies, the $250 million that they gave. They support Gates's agenda on charter schools. support journalistic organizations such as the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting, the National Press Foundation, International Center for Journalists. So they are just giving hundreds of millions of dollars across the board to try to gain influence over what various media outlets are reporting. So why would I say, of course, this strategy is not illegal, but I would compare it to very similar strategies deployed by other tyrants and other nations where they do make it either illegal. It's illegal whether it's written in law. Some nations it's written in law, some it's not, but it's still illegal because if you criticize the ruling oligarchs in these nations, you're either going to go to jail for more than a decade or end up dead. Okay, so it's illegal whether it's written in law or not. So these types of great tyranny is deployed in some nations in Southeast Asia, some nations in Africa, some Middle Eastern nations. Already, I said one nation in which this tyranny went under the radar for decades, I said in a previous podcast, was in the African nation of Morocco. Because if you spoke out against the Moroccan king, you would basically be arrested, physically, psychologically tortured in windowless underground tombs. Underground tombs where you could just basically lie down, you couldn't exercise, you couldn't even sit up comfortably, and you would just be fed enough food to keep you alive for years and decades on end. And the people that actually survived this grueling psychological and physical torture, where the guards would actually dump scorpions and roaches into your dark tomb, which received no light, which is underground and hot. The people that actually survived when they came out, that they were actually many, many centimeters shorter. That's how physically malnourished they were, besides being psychologically tortured by the king of Morocco. And nobody knew about this outside of the nation of Morocco for decades. Okay, so I see this. Obviously, Bill Gates is not torturing people to believing what his narrative is about, like the virus or anything else. But I'm saying if you control the narrative, right? In some nations, they will lock you away forever. In others, you try to buy favor with the media. Then you control the perception of what reality is, and you can change the perception of reality into something that is completely wrong, that fits your ulterior motives for what your vision of the global issue is about certain domains. So, okay, let me begin by stating something that, okay, this actually, there's no proof this was ever said. So a lot of times I also want to lead by saying that there's a lot of things. I have always said that like 99.9% of what exists on the internet, there's no high value content. There's maybe 0.1% high value content. And even some of the stuff I wrote, right, about gold and silver price manipulation, which people called ludicrous more than a decade ago. If you Google that, even though I left some of those articles up, you will never find it because Google has censored the truth out of their search algorithm results. So even if there is real truth that exists out there on the internet, it's still almost impossible to find. I've always likened it to, you're going to be able to find the high value content like searching for a little small pebble in the Pacific Ocean. It's going to be very, very difficult to find, and because it's just a sliver of all the information out there that's really truthful, the high value content, and then even the sliver, a lot of times the Google search algorithms will make it impossible to find it. But this is one that was always a big critique of the Rockefeller family, but there's no proof that this was ever said. People said this was said at a Council on Foreign Relations meeting in 1991, but there's no documentable evidence. And here is the quote that's often repeated, because most of the quotes online that they say people have said that documents the evil nature of this person or these families is not true. So here's a quote. "We are grateful to the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plan for the world if we had been subjected to the delights of publicity during those years. But the world is more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite and world bankers is surely preferable to the national auto-determination practiced in past centuries, end quote. So that is like a quote that I've seen so many times people say that David Rockefeller said, but there's no proof of that. What there is proof of is on page 405 of his book Memoirs, because this was an autobiography. This is a direct quote from page 405 of David Rockefeller's autobiography titled Memoirs. Quote, some even believe we, the Rockefeller family, are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure. One world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty and I am proud of it, end quote. Okay, so that's one thing that we can attribute to David Rockefeller having said, because it's taken directly from his autobiographical book. And here is something that is on record on the congressional website in 1917, said by US Congressman Oscar Callaway about J.P. Morgan. Quote, in March 1915, the J.P. Morgan interests, the steel, shipbuilding, and powder interests, and their subsidiary organizations got together 12 men high up in the newspaper world and employed them to select the most influential newspapers in the United States and sufficient number of them to control, generally, the policy of the daily press. They found it was only necessary to purchase the control of 25 of the greatest papers. An agreement was reached. The policy of the papers was bought to be paid for by the month. An editor was furnished for each paper to properly supervise and edit information regarding the questions of preparedness, militarism, financial policies, and other things of national and international nature considered vital to the interests of the purchasers, end quote. So this is an actual part of the US Congressional Record that is documentable. So we see in 1915, J.P. Morgan tried to control the public narrative by buying up media. So that's why I say Bill Gates, I just told you, just did the exact same thing and donating more than $250 million to media interests all around the world, in the Middle East, in Europe, in America, in the UK. He's doing the same, he's executing the same strategy as John Pierpont Morgan, better known as J.P. Morgan. And so again, you know, many people then will read things and narratives, say, about the lockdowns, about the COVID that's propagated by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and all these interests and all these media interests, and believe it to be true when it's the furthest thing. It's pure propaganda. And here's a quick thing, because as I said, I was going to make my ebook, The Golden Gift. Please, if you have any question of what sound money is, you don't understand, or you don't understand why the current global financial system of fiat currency is immoral. There's no doubt that it is immoral. In my mind, there's no doubt, and I think there's no doubt in anybody that understands what sound money really is, that it is highly, highly immoral system. Because people today still have no idea what characteristics sound money should possess. Primarily because most of us have been miseducated about monetary principles in school, while the rest of us have not been educated at all, you know, or have been miseducated by the media. Again, who controls media? People like Bill Gates, people like the biggest bankers and biggest financiers and biggest corporate globalists in the entire world. So when people state today that cryptocurrencies backed by nothing are the new gold or better than gold, this clearly shows a complete lack of understanding about the concept of sound money. And again, one shouldn't get angry and furious, because many people, I say this, that are big holders of cryptos, or hodlers, HODL, because that's what they call, you know, buy and never sell, they get furious when I say something like this. And it's so childish and so infantile, because I'm just stating a fact of what there's certain characteristics sound money need to have. And it's not even, I've even said, the whole blockchain could give birth to sound money, because if it gives birth to a widely used cryptocurrency independent of the central banking system, independent of the global banking system, that is 100% backed by gold or 100% by metallic system backed by gold and physical silver, then yes, cryptocurrency could be really sound money, as could be used to reinstate sound money all around the world. So far too many of us just dismiss any criticism levied against the asset we hold just because the mob has told them something differently. And I already told you how mob opinion is controlled. It's being controlled by the oligarchs. So is it smart to believe what the whole mob believes, what everyone believes within your community? Because I'm telling you, those perceptions and beliefs are being manipulated by the billionaire oligarchs, supposedly that you dislike. So if you understand and start connecting the dots of what I am telling you within this podcast, then you should not be somebody that is ever misled again at any point in your life. Because any intellect will always consider whether a statement is true, absent the voiced objections of the mob that's influencing your particular community, before forming an opinion for himself or herself about what is true and what is not. Okay, so let me just give you a couple other examples, because I told you Raymond Sackler is one. Who is Raymond Sackler? He's probably a person that's worse than Pablo Escobar, because the Sackler family, okay, Arthur, I believe, was a younger brother of Raymond. He first marketed it. A lot of people don't know this. A lot of these companies that are so influential started out as chemical companies. Like Bayer started out as a chemical company before they started going to pharmaceuticals, and now GMOs because Bayer bought out Monsanto. Pfizer, people only think of Pfizer as a pharmaceutical company. No, it was a pure chemical company back in the day, till Arthur Sackler then marketed antibiotic with them, and then actually transformed marketing and pharmaceuticals forever, because it became much more stylish, much more flashy, much more addictive. And then he used these more modern sales and marketing tactics that pharmaceutical companies had not started using back in the 60s, then to turn Valium into the first $1 billion pharmaceutical drug. And then with the revenue, because I remember I said he first marketed antibiotic, so for the revenue of the antibiotic, then the Sackler brothers, which included his brother Raymond, they purchased Purdue Pharmaceuticals. And a lot of people still don't know, what is Purdue? Well, you'll know Purdue because Purdue marketed Oxycontin, right? And that gave birth to the major opioid crisis in America. And in fact, just with a sales force of 1,000 people, Purdue gained notoriety in the pharmaceutical industry for paying the highest bonuses and for having the most aggressive, don't take no for an answer, sales reps in the entire industry. And this is what one West Virginia doctor said when he recalled, these doing business with Purdue pharmaceutical sales reps. He said, quote, "My Purdue rep was the most aggressive salesman I'd ever seen. At our clinic, I would run away from him when I saw him, and he would run after me," end quote. Because guess what? Within 5 years, Oxycontin, which people, if you don't know what Oxycontin is, it's basically legalized heroin. The chemical structure, when you break it down, is identical to heroin, but actually, because it's pharmaceutical grade heroin, it actually was much more addictive. And they reached sales well over $1 billion annually, which allowed the Sackler family by 2016 become the 19th wealthiest family in America, with an estimated net worth of $13 billion on the backbone of death, destruction, and misery, bringing death, destruction, and misery to hundreds of thousands of Americans. Because at the height of that opioid crisis, 230,000 Americans died from opioids. Okay, of course, not all of them were from Oxycontin, but Oxycontin, the Sackler family was responsible for a good percentage of this 230,000 deaths. So, and also the famous advertising agency McKinsey, or consulting firm, more of a consulting firm than advertising agency, they got into deep water because they had a document and a proposal to Purdue Company, because Purdue hired them to see how can we get more people hooked and make more money from this opioid crisis, in which they suggested, it was never implemented, but they had a document, and this was their consulting advice to Purdue. They were going to make secret payments to insurance companies up to $14,000 whenever a patient became addicted and then died from an event linked to Oxycontin. Okay, so that was made public in November of 2020, I think, by the attorneys that represented a class action suit against Purdue Pharmaceuticals from the families that had loved ones that died from overdosing on Oxycontin. And even a U.S. Senator, Josh Hawley from Missouri, stated, quote, McKinsey's abhorrent conduct also demands that Congress consider broader action. No firm that proposes paying kickbacks for overdose deaths should receive a single cent from U.S. taxpayers, end quote. So I'm not even sure why he's referencing, he said receive a single cent from U.S. taxpayers. So was McKinsey also receiving some type of, corporate welfare like Tesla from U.S. taxes going to Purdue Pharmaceuticals? I'm not really sure what that was about, him saying that Purdue Pharmaceuticals should be cut off from receiving U.S. taxpayer money. But again, that figure of 230,000 deaths, that came from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control. It said died from prescription, not from the street corner drug dealer slinging heroin. It said, CDC said 230,000 Americans died from prescription opioid-related overdoses, okay? And so when you think about that, right, that would make Raymond Sackler a worse devil than Pablo Escobar. And Pablo Escobar is someone, now here's the thing, before this became known, the Sacklers were known as this great philanthropic family. Just like, of course, they did a lot of philanthropic work to cover up the evil of what they were really doing. So that's why people that really have never gone and investigated Bill Gates and just look and say, oh, he's doing all this great philanthropic work. They don't really understand, because nobody understood about Raymond Sackler either. For years, he was lauded as this wonderful philanthropist before the reality of how evil his family was really came to light. And the same thing with Pablo Escobar, because although, obviously everyone knows Pablo Escobar is one of the biggest drug lords and was one of the biggest distributors of cocaine in the entire world back in the prime of his cocaine slinging days, because Pablo Escobar, however, within his nation of Colombia, was known as this great purveyor of charitable endeavors, including building schools for the poor, building football fields for the poor, building churches for the poor, building hospitals, even building housing developments for the poor people. But you know what he was doing in his housing developments? He was slinging cocaine in the housing developments, making more money from housing the homeless in Colombia, or those that couldn't afford to be housed. He had his cocaine distribution networks go into those housing developments he provided for free. So, but even so, why he did that, why he wasn't from the goodness of his heart that he was doing this. Number one, as I said, because he was distributing some cocaine even through his public charitable works. And number two, he was doing that like building hospitals and schools where he wasn't slinging drugs, or football pitches where he wasn't slinging drugs. He was doing that to gain protection from the neighborhood. So when cops came looking for him, or whatever they called, the international police that came looking for him, they wouldn't give him up because he had done so much for the community. So you don't think Bill Gates has these same ulterior motives? You really need to do your research on Bill Gates, because I'm telling you, because of all these great charitable works Escobar did in his homeland, there are still people to this day that are amongst the Colombian poor that view him more as a saint, more of a saint than a devil, even though they know of all the bad things Pablo Escobar did. And when you think about it, like I said, right, if you ask people to this day, who's a bigger devil, Escobar or Raymond Sackler? They would still say Escobar, right? But what is the real difference between did Escobar hand anyone his cocaine to get them hooked to destroy their lives? Escobar never even, there's no record of him personally pulling the trigger to kill anyone. Okay, so when you say, okay, well, the Sackler family didn't really kill hundreds of thousands of people in America because it was just indirect. They were slinging pharmaceutical grade heroin, and that's caused overdose deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, most likely in America, out of this 230,000 overdose deaths. But the same thing is that, Pablo Escobar wasn't dealing his own cocaine. He had his network of distributors, right? So the people that overdosed, or he wasn't pulling the trigger. He was actually, they said, his hitman said, okay, that he killed 300 people personally and then gave orders to kill another 3,000. So we all know too that hitmen love to brag, right? So was he really responsible for 3,300 people? Like Pablo Escobar, was he really responsible for ordering the deaths of 3,300 people? And most likely, it probably was less than that, because we all know how all these hitmen always brag about how many people they killed. So, let's say the braggadocio was actually realistic, but we all know that they over-exaggerate. So we know it's not 3,300 people, okay, that died under a direct order of Pablo Escobar. But let's even consider that it was. Okay, so Sackler may have killed 200,000 people. That's not even that's barely 1.5%. So Pablo Escobar is responsible for killing about 1.5% of the people that Raymond Sackler may have killed. But yet people always look, because they think of Sackler as a philanthropist, just like they still think of Gates as a philanthropist, because they don't really understand what they're doing behind the scenes, what they are trying to do, and what their ulterior motives are. Because like I said, they cover up their really bad intentions. Like I said, with the Rockefellers, with the JP Morgan family, with the Sackler family, they cover it up in philanthropy. So that's why I say Bill Gates is the new JP Morgan. He's probably you could call him the new Pablo Escobar too, covering up your bad intentions with philanthropy. And if you don't know what those bad intentions are with the Gates family, okay, just go, because it's highly documented. Look at Vindana Shiva, what Vindana Shiva said. Look at how Bill Gates is the biggest owner of farmland in the entire United States, which a lot of people don't know. Why is he doing that? Why is Bill Gates trying to get control over all the seeds, right? With his connection to, I believe he's on the board of, that big secret seed vault in Norway, where they stored all the seeds from all the food crops in the entire world. I'm almost positive that Bill and Gates Melinda Foundation is part of that board. So go look up what he's connected to, what he's trying to control the food supply. And of course, that doesn't mean that he's this big evil person that is, trying to reserve all that, all the food for just the top 0.1% of wealthiest people in the world. I'm not saying that, but there have been, even his vaccination efforts in Africa are extremely, extremely questionable, right? There have been some documented evidence that the Bill and Gates Melinda Foundation was kicked out of Africa because they were using orphans to test vaccines on, because you did not need to get documentation, because of course child orphans don't have any parents, and we don't know the safety of these vaccines, so let's test them on kids. If they die, then there's going to be no repercussions. There's going to be no one to sue us. So there are things that are super sus and super suspicious and super just shady, and if not downright bad intentions that are linked to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation that they get a total pass on, because they try to position themselves as these great philanthropists. So go look at that, and that's what I really want people to look at. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. That just about wraps up what I want to say, is that you can't just accept these perceptions, because guess who's creating these perceptions about themselves? The people, by donating hundreds of millions of dollars to create these perceptions. So if you just accept these perceptions that are created about people, about institutions like central banks and accept that as truth without really understanding that these people are spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to create these perceptions that don't align with reality when you really look at what is the foundation of this person's character. Is this person a really honorable character, or is this person a coward that tries to suppress any dissenting voice and narrative about how good this person is, or how charitable this person is, or how heroic this person is? When you see a lot of this dissent squashed through the controlling media that's 100% documentable, then hopefully you'll begin to understand that these perceptions are not aligned with reality. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy my work, please do give it a like. Please do hit the notification bell. Please do go to my audio-only podcast, which you can find in the show notes below. And if you would like to kick me back something for all the hours I do of research that goes into every single podcast, please consider becoming a Patreon of mine. You can start out at just $5 a month, the cost of a Starbucks coffee, and you get so much bonus content every single week and every single month at just the $5 a month level. And that is at patreon.com/skwealthacademy. And finally, I give a great bless up, a great os to everyone that's contributed to my GoFundMe campaign that will help me launch my SK Wealth Academy. If you're really interested in what this 20-course online academy will be, the entire fact sheet, the entire curriculum can be downloaded at my new site, which you can go find in the podcast show notes below on my YouTube channel. So just go there if you want to find out how I'm trying to revolutionize the entire global educational system, because I believe it's really lacking in super, super important pillars, being critical thinking and real applicable knowledge, especially in the business sense, in the monetary sense, in the wealth building sense. There is really very, very little applicable knowledge ever given in MBA programs and business schools. And that is what I'm trying to fill, the big gap between just knowledge that we're taught to memorize that really does not impact our quality of life and raising our quality of life in any manner and capacity at all, to the courses I'm giving in which there are no exams, because exams in which you just vomit back information never improves your quality of life. So I'm all about applicability in the real world. So there are exercises, all of the knowledge I give, I guarantee you, you're not going to receive even at Harvard Business School, even at Cambridge, even at MIT, even at what's considered the top schools in the world. How do I know that? Because I graduated from an Ivy League university. I received 2 master's degrees, one in an MBA in finance. So I know you don't receive any of the knowledge that I'm giving that's applicable. I feel basically that huge gap that is a Grand Canyon-sized gap of real knowledge that can help in the world. And if you want to help with that launch, you can also go to the link below and contribute to my GoFundMe campaign, because I've been locked down for an entire year by this travel lockdown, unable to launch. So all this funds I'd set aside now been totally used up by my period of a full year of lockdown due to this travel lockdown. That's nonsense, by the way, that Bill Gates is one of the biggest proponents of this global lockdown, because he knows there are those of us that are trying to spread the truth of what reality is in this world, and they don't want people to understand this truth. In fact, they just want people screaming and yelling at each other for not wearing a mask when it's not necessary, because masking does not stop the spread of the virus. Even if you believe the virus is lethal, which it really is not unless you're 70 years of age or older. And I wouldn't even use lethal. It's dangerous at 70 years of age or older. And it just slows down the spread, but it never stops it. And that is a scientific fact. If you don't believe that, go do your research on that. Okay, so thanks so much for watching. As always, remember always to remain grateful, because we have to keep a positive mindset. I always try to be positive despite the past 12 months being some of the worst 12 months of my adult life. I try to remain positive and always remain strong. We have to remain united. We have to work together. If nothing, just join my newsletter so you can be part of my community. I want to build a global community, because eventually when I launch my academy, I want to use the revenues that come in from my academy to build my own social media platform that can put all of my clients of SK Wealth Academy in touch with each other so we can help each other grow in knowledge, in light, in honor, in courage, and in intellect. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, take care.